All right, Jack, it's our second week here at Meet at the Tavern. I'm glad to be here. Yeah, a lot of fun last week, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, this is pretty cool. Not knowing what you're doing and just doing it anyway.
Hey, we had a few technical errors last week, and hopefully we'll get them straightened out. First one, we tried to edit and do it all ourselves, and I think I got it down now. But we'll see.
Yeah, congratulations to Dennis. Again, we don't know what we're doing. We don't have any staff to look up information or sound guys. Nobody to upload this. Dennis had literally learned this whole thing on his own, and but a little bit of it got chopped up. You guys heard, we were talking about Myrtle Beach and the problems, the quality of life problems they're having right now with homeless peddlers and prostitutes and pimps and drug dealers, and how they're starting to take over the streets a little bit.
And it's not just Myrtle Beach; it's everywhere. San Francisco, Portland. It doesn't matter. I mean, every single state has their issues, quality of life issues, that no one's even taking a look at. No one's caring.
Yeah, I mean, that's what these elected officials are here for our quality of life on this smaller level of government. And, that's a disinterest, and it shouldn't be. This is, quality of life problems grow into bigger problems.
Oh, that's true. So I've got my rum and Coke.
Yeah, I got mine.
Jack has his.
Mine's iced up. You hear that? You should be able. My microphone's very loud today.
So whatever you're drinking out there, it doesn't have to be a mixed drink. Doesn't have to be any alcohol at all. Just grab a water, grab a iced tea, grab a Coke. It doesn't matter. Just sit back, and we got a couple of things we want to tell you today. Before we get going, again, our website, uscgnational2021.godaddysite.com. And like I said, I'm glad to be here again this week. Jack didn't fire me, so I lucked out. And like I said before, we're gonna do this once a week, hopefully on Mondays. But we need to hear from you. We want to get you involved, find what's going on in your state, start a state group, and with your help, we can change politics and keep America great. And think about this for our future generations, like our founding fathers did, and all the wisdom they had.
Amen.
But we got a reply from Margaret, who asked, how do we encourage the younger generation to understand the Constitution when they believe it needs to be updated and changed? And second, how do we get them to compare and contrast the needs of the people in the 1700s to the needs of the people today?
All right. So those are the questions we have.
Yep, 2 so far.
All right, for the discussion to continue with both generations, young and old, that want to change this form of government, they need to explain their beliefs and feelings and why the form of government you live under should be changed. What would you change? What would you change it into? How will you make this country better than what we have today? You say that this government's no good, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that. This and that don't fix nothing. What are you looking for in your government? Ask yourself that. Because, it's easy to criticize something when you don't know what's on the other side.
People love to criticize everybody.
The grass is always greener.
Yep. Until you get on the other side where the grass isn't green.
So, when you have somebody asking a question like Margaret, how do you encourage the younger generation to understand the Constitution? The first thing you have to ask them, I believe, is, what do you believe in? What's the government you're looking for? What do you want out of your government? Because the Constitution was founded to keep government out of your life. I know it doesn't look like that a lot today, because they're taking they're taking every aspect of your life and trying to pry it out of your wallet. Because after reviewing the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States, along with the Federalist Papers, we're not smart enough to envision a different type of government that will protect the minority party. And
I don't think the Democrats or the Republicans, when they get in control, they don't want it. They never want to be the minority party.
Well, it goes back to the first podcast that we had that got cut out. years ago, our politicians, they were like kids coloring in a crayon in a coloring book. The picture being a declaration, they go out of lines a little bit. Oh, let's bring it back in. And as years go by, they start going out of the lines more and more until they're just scribbling all over the page, and there's no beauty to that picture in a coloring book anymore. Because, like we said last week, it's really easy not to follow the Constitution. That's hard work. That's hard work for these politicians, and boy, they don't want to dirty their hands.
Well, they don't want to debate each other.
No, but we'll get into that later on. We got that on there too. Now, to answer the second question, we don't think there's a comparison between the 1700 today, because unbelievably, while the founding fathers were debating the U.S. Constitution in 1787, there was no term for a representative form of government created by the people rather than by a king. They are protected. That protected our people, especially the minority party. So they're debating a government that represents the people, that was formed by the people, not a king or a ruler, and protects all the people, in specifically the minority parties. As you can see, if you listen to the last podcast, we don't have faith in today's leadership. We feel that they're protecting themselves and nobody else. Politicians of today are more like an oligarch of ancient governments who are money hungry and blind with greed. All politicians of today, they rule by emotion and not through the Constitution, which is the law of the land. It is impossible to lead through emotion and disregard the law.
Yeah, they not only want to protect themselves, but they want to feed their special interests and their lobbyists. Because in a roundabout way, they're on their payroll, and they're going to get something out of it when they're out of office.
Yeah, the national political climate today, they're not worrying about the paycheck that we give them. They're worried about what the special interest is going to give them. And, I heard an interesting newscast the other day, and the guy asked the question, why are we being taxed? Why is the American people being taxed anymore? Because it's impossible for the government to pay their debt right now.
Oh, yeah.
Through taxation of the people of the United States. So what they're doing is printing money. So if they're printing money, what are they doing with our tax dollars?
Raising them.
For what reason, though? If they need money, just print it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
So what do we pay? Why? I mean, when this person said this on the news, I was like, holy smokes, that is everything in a nutshell. If you're just going to print the money you need, they just spent.
It's $5 trillion, almost $6 trillion for the stimulus over the last 8 months.
Right. We can't pay that. And they're going to raise our tax. We can pay that in 100 years.
Yeah, our grandkids will pay for it. Their grandkids. But my question that Margaret had for us also was, how do we get them to research and study and get them to realize that the Constitution is as strong now as it was when it was written?
Well, for the third question that you just asked, I think you and I, we're both hoping to show a contrast in their beliefs and realities of the Constitution to feel a hunger to find out what is right and wrong. So if they're listening to this program, send it out to your nephews and your kids and your grandkids, and they hear a different way of it. A regular person that didn't go to school and learn this. We're not one of the experts on TV, on the Idiot Box. Maybe they'll find a hunger to find out what is right and what is wrong.
I think we've done this the hard way by not, being constitutional scholars. Just two average guys who just got fed up with politics.
Yeah, and when you start looking at this stuff, it's it creates a hunger. You do get a hunger in it.
That's true, you do.
So, I think what we really want to do is We want to have the people that don't believe in this type of government, of a republic, to look at it, to investigate it like we did, to read about it. Investigate's a little hard. Read it. It's not overly complicated. Read and understand each line. Each line and each word has a meaning in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And then, do not be afraid to question what's being told to them by anyone, especially the people of power, through the news and especially their professors in school. Question them. Give them the hard questions. Don't be sheep. Don't sit back and say, well, if he's saying it, must be true. If that professor over there, look what the professor does. They're a professor. This is what they do. Yeah, that's true, but they might be interpreting it wrong, like we said last week in the podcast.
Right. You can't be intimidated to ask questions just because they're in a position of power and they think they're smarter than us. They're not. They're not. We elect them. We can get rid of them too. But how are we going to reach the younger generation?
Well, I believe the answer to this question is the hardest. The best example I can show is my sister. She's very excited about these podcasts, and any information she finds out, it turns, she ends up forwarding our podcast to her daughter, our nieces and nephews. Anybody she feels might not agree with that type of government. So, as it was years ago, hopefully we get enough parents and grandparents listening to the podcast and joining this group and making their own groups so they will have the information to argue this debate and maybe get the younger generation to listen to this podcast and then investigate on their own. If you feel this type of government or republic is not right for this country, look into these documents and find that founded this country. And again, don't be afraid to ask questions of any of the people in power and see if you can come up with a better government. And then
I don't think anybody will be able to.
Well, you know what?
You never know.
You never know. And if they have certain grievances, not with the whole government, but maybe bits and parts of it, they may be right. They may be right, and if they are, get in touch with us. Write us, on our webpage. We have an email. It comes right to us. And just like with Margaret had listened to the first podcast, and she had written those 3 questions. And those are our answers. We don't know if they're right or wrong, but from what we've read and what we've looked up,
show us we're wrong.
Right.
If you think we're wrong, show us. Hey, we'll debate. We can have an adult debate, and our feelings won't get hurt.
Yes.
But we reach one person at a time. Like we said last week. This isn't going to be like the easiest battle to win. We need to get excited, about our great history and to show them that we lived in the greatest country in the world. And like I said, we can't be afraid to ask questions and make decisions about our representatives and the laws they pass. We have a right to know what they're doing and what they're saying.
Right. What we're asking for is please do not silence your opinion. If you think your opinion is right, and do not speak about it, nobody will know if they're wrong or right. Debate is the power of all knowledge. I have a quote from a philosopher from the mid-1800s. Actually, it's I think a little later, maybe the 1870s. His name is John Stuart Mills, and he says, "All silencing of discussion is an assumption of infallibility." There it is, right there. If you keep your opinions and quiet, Jefferson Douglass said that being silent is 2 wrongs for the speaker and the listener. So don't be silent with your opinion. Send it out. Let us know where you're going. Maybe we'll learn something.
Yeah, basically what he's saying is we need to speak up and be heard. A squeaky wheel gets the oil. That's the only way we're going to be heard is if we talk. But thank you, Margaret, for the advice on the website. And we've made the changes to make it more user-friendly. And if anyone else has any more suggestions after looking at our webpage, just send us a message, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. I know Jack wants to expand on the Declaration of Independence and show everyone how what was happening in the 1700s is happening today in today's political climate. And I think for Mark, this will probably be a great comparison.
So we're going to review some of the oppressions. And the oppressions are what was in the Declaration written to King George, why they were disavowing him as their ruler and making a Declaration of Independence. They were going to be independent. So it's kind of close to today's political climate. You can decide for yourself. But this is the way Dennis and I see it. You can download the Declaration from my webpage, and you can number it to follow along if you want. I numbered mine in my own copy that I bought.
It works.
Yeah. So the number one oppression that was written starts as he refuses to assent to laws, but the fourth one that stands out to me. The fourth one, so he doesn't make the laws, but number 4 of the oppressions, he has called together legislative bodies out of places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the deposit of their public record for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with these measures. So in other words, King George was, if you were in South Carolina, he'd make your legislator meet in North Carolina or Virginia. So it's not on the same grand scale as that, but Adam Schiff had meetings about the first Trump impeachment in the basement without any Republicans in the meetings, holding secret meetings and trying to impeach a sitting president. If that doesn't tell you it's shady, then I don't know what does.
Yeah, our founding fathers in their infinite wisdom, I thought they knew this was going to happen. And Madison, one of the 3 authors for the Federalist Papers, wrote in Federalist Papers number 58, the people can never err more in supposing that by multiplying their representatives beyond a certain limit, they strengthen the barrier against the government of a few. Experience will never admonish them. On the contrary, after securing a sufficient number for the purpose of safety of local information and a diffusive sympathy with the whole society, they will counteract their own views by every addition to their representatives. The countenance of the government may become more democratic, but the soul that animated it will be more autocratic, but the soul that animates him will be oligarchic. The machine may be enlarged, but the fewer and often more in secret, folks, will be by the springs by which motions are directed. That is just what happened when Adam Schiff had his inquiries in the first impeachment hearings. We all heard it was in a basement. There were no Republicans present at all. What's this telling you, folks?
And remember that word oligarch. That in ancient times when they were discussing governments, oligarch was the form of government that you were trying to get away from into a democracy, which in turn at the end turned into an oligarch anyway. But this is how we get the younger generation involved. By showing them throughout the 200 plus years the Constitution made it through so much, and what has happened, during the early days of our unions, is currently happening today. The next one was number 11. And it says, he has kept among us in time of peace standing armies without the consent of legislators. Look at the Capitol and the fence. Why are they keeping us out? This is part of the reason we fought the Revolutionary War. This is it. This is it. They have a standing army behind a fence of our Capitol building. An armed army at the Capitol building. Think about that for a minute.
I still don't get that one. I can't fathom it. I think about it every day. What are these people trying to hide from us? What are they hiding from and why? These governors need to demand they have their state militia back. We're not under attack. We're not at war.
Amen.
Take the fence down and let us back into our house. It's not theirs, it's ours. I am tired of hearing members of Congress say they fear for their lives. It's ridiculous. They don't fear for their lives. They have so much security there, it's not even funny. They didn't give a damn last summer when local citizens in riot areas feared for their lives and their property. They were silent.
Yeah, it's because their ass wasn't on the line.
Right. Oh, I get it. It didn't affect them, and it played into their political hands. They ignored it. The Me Too movement is fine unless it affects their party. That's Republican and Democrat. It's a disgrace to see our elected representatives talk this way. I don't know about you, but these people annoy the heck out of me.
Well, it goes back to, again, these are the legislators. This is the Congress of the most powerful country in the world. Look at how they're acting. They stomp their feet and hold their breath, call each other names, and then when they call each other names, oh, that's an outrage. How dare you call me that name? Meanwhile, everything else around them, I mean, you have Russia literally telling our president that, he'll debate him. And China, unlike what Biden said when he was running, they're eating our lunch.
Yeah, but the thing about it is, what are these people fearing? Why are they hiding from us? Why is there so much bureaucracy between us? It's ridiculous.
Well, I tell you, the bureaucracy was taken out of the podcast last week. And we were talking how the bureaucracies are now making the laws, which the Supreme Court will not hear because the legislators that are supposed to be making these laws gave the power to these bureaucracies to make these laws. So our legislators don't know what laws that these bureaucracies are making, and then our bureaucracy, our representatives don't write bills either. The special interests do. And Dennis had numbers last week of the number of pages that were in these bills.
Yeah, like the Affordable Care Act, 2,700 pages. You mean to tell me they read every single one before they passed that in the middle of the night?
I can prove that they didn't read that because let me tell you something. I want you guys to go to the store the next time, go to a bookstore and pick out Gone with the Wind or Tale of Two Cities, and look at the size of that book and say, "There's no way in hell I'm going to read that book. I'm going to go home and watch it on TV." You get a book, you get a bill that's 2,700 pages long. You can't even put that on your lap and read it.
You can't.
It's too heavy.
Yeah, you're right. It is way too heavy.
And you can tell that special interest writing this. They got rid of this part, but you think a legislator from Oklahoma wanted a $150 million subway from Silicon Valley to San Francisco?
Yeah, no.
That represents his constituents really good, right?
Yeah, really good.
Give me a break, people.
We talked about the laws of naturalization. I mean, we have a huge crisis at the border with all the migrants coming through. Again, these founders described as why we should be free from British rule is happening right here. I mean, today at our border. I'm going to talk about Texas in a little while, and I'm very passionate about this. I just don't know why. Just illegal immigration annoys me. We want people to come here. We want them to come here legally.
Yeah. We talked about H.R. 1, the Voting Rights Act. In the Declaration, it states, given his assent to the acts of pretended legislation. I have that marked as number 13. This is what our Congress is doing to our own Constitution with the H.R. 1 bill. They're trying to go around the Constitution and implement this without it being ratified by the states, which requires 3/4 for it to be a constitutional amendment. Voting on should be not allowed to pass without a constitutional amendment. They're taking the stage, they're taking the states' rights and conducting our elections. I think it was in that podcast, right? Where they're doing it 6 times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The good news about not appreciating what your representatives are doing is that the founding fathers. I don't want to sound bitter and cranky and old on this, but there's a light, and the light is every 2 years we get to vote, and these smaller votes is where you want to get. These in-between votes of presidents is where you get your representatives and your senators and your congressmen and your state and local who will eventually be up there. If these people understand that they have to know their state constitution, and then when they run for federal, they have to know the federal and the Bill of Rights, and they have to understand this. This is what we were talking about last week. We could talk about our government 100 hours a day, but we only get to act on them a couple times.
Yeah. So if everybody out there needs to call their congressional members and tell them to vote no on that H.R. 1, because it's going to hurt our country. They want 16-year-olds to vote. 16-year-olds shouldn't be voting.
No, they should be barely allowed out of the house by themselves. Never
Playing
mind go vote.
baseball and doing the things they do. Again, HR 1 is on our website, USCG National 2021, GoDaddySites.com. And we said it last week, the politicians know we don't do our homework. They think we're uneducated, so they keep doing whatever they want until we say enough.
Yeah, they think we're as lazy as they are.
Yeah, I am so sick and tired of all these Republicans and Democrats. You know, we may come to a point in the United States that we create 2 separate states, and we'll talk about that in a future podcast. But the Republican states of America and the Democratic states of America, because we're like divided down the middle. I mean, I don't think it's a good idea, but since we are so divided, we may have to look at that option down the road.
Yeah, I think our founding fathers have it the right way. If we're doing something like this, if we're doing this United States Constitutional Group, there's other people out there doing the same thing we are. And that's what grassroots is all about. You know, whether they join our group or start their own because they heard this podcast or heard somebody talking about it, that's what's going to get people interested. We need to get interested in our own government. And to get back to that, the other one was number 10. He has erected a multitude of new offices. So, on number 10, the impressions mentioned in the line was King George has erected a multitude of new offices. Well, that's what our legislators have been doing for decades. They've been doing this for decades, and it's causing endless bureaucracies and taxes to fund them, and they're making laws. And remember, laws are a force, and we consent to the force of laws. But the ones that our legislators were supposed to make, not bureaucracies. I mean, these bureaucracies are making laws that our own legislators don't even know about.
You got that right. It takes a law degree to read these things.
Yeah. You know, number 17 was also they constantly impose taxes on us without consent. This subject can last an hour. I could talk about this. So the oppression number 17 was the taxes that King George was putting on. And we all know about the stories with, taxation without representation and the Tea Party and stuff like that. Well, I was listening to a economist, and they were talking about federal, state, and local taxes. And there's some places in this country where people are paying up to 70% taxes after the federal, state, and local taxes that are being applied to them. And again,
it's ridiculous.
Think about what that other guy said. What are they doing with these tax money? Because whenever they need money, they just print it up. They don't need our tax money. We can't pay these debts back. We cannot pay them.
Hey, remember Biden when he was going, through the campaign, no one was going to get their taxes raised?
Yeah.
And then he said, if you make less than $400,000, any taxes won't get raised. I heard yesterday that if you make under $200,000, your taxes won't get raised. So who would you believe? What are we going to believe? Is it 200, 400? Your taxes are going up. The gas price has gone up 60 cents.
That's a tax itself.
In 2 months. You're right. That's a tax itself.
That's a tax itself. And the worst tax in the world is, I think he was in office for 44 days and he launched missiles into Syria.
Yeah.
Nobody knows why yet. We don't understand why he did that.
We're up to like 60 days with no press conference.
Yeah. He shoots missiles into Syria. A base in Iraq gets blown up. You see the pattern here? So, you're talking about taxes and you're talking about gas going up. Now, there's no reason for gas to go up because the last administration showed that we're energy independent. And, all right, money's money, and we can all make money to get by, hopefully, most of us. But the nerve of these diplomats, these politicians, to put our young troops back into the sand of the Middle East for a commodity that we have in our own backyard.
It's not a fun place over there, folks. Trust me, I know.
Yeah.
It's not a fun place.
So if one person gets killed because we're back in the Middle East for the same old story, somebody should be held. That's a tax we cannot afford to pay. The life and blood of our young heroes that are in the service right now.
Yep.
Fighting for something that we do not need. And they cut us off. And now we're back in it.
You know, Jack talked about levels of bureaucracy. I don't think Department A know that Department B is their boss. I mean, they do this for a reason, as we said in our first podcast. They want to get as far away from us as they can, these politicians. The more departments they have between us, the better they feel. I mean, Jack mentioned taxes. Don't you feel we pay enough in taxes? I mean, we all work hard for our money, folks. I mean, why do we give them more and more and more back to the federal government when they don't represent us properly? Why do we pay more in office? We pay more when a Democratic president than we under a Republican president. We need a fair system. I can agree with that. But our leaders want class welfare. Divide the people into wealthy and poor. This way they can tax the wealthy and take care of the poor. They want to take care of every aspect of you. It's all bull, people. These politicians don't care what happens to me or you. These politicians don't want a free society. They want to control society.
Yes, they definitely want to control society because you know, and they don't just break us down in poor and rich. They break us down in religion, race, country, ethnicity, gender. Now you're not even allowed to know what gender you are. So, anyway, we talked about COVID a little last week, but here again, in the Declaration, the king, you know, they one of the impressions was they plunder our seas, ravage our coasts, burn out our towns, and destroy the lives of our people. That has happened over the last 12 months. From the lockdowns to the riots, people's towns have been burned down, lives and businesses destroyed because of the decision of our elected leaders. They were silent for all of these violent protests, which destroyed cities and families and generations of businesses. They didn't care until January 6th, when they thought their own ass was in danger. Oh man. You know, don't get my heart rate up. You can't see, they don't care about the well-being of us. And basically they just care about advancing their political agenda. And now, they can do it behind a fence.
Yeah.
And an armed army.
Yeah, they got 2,500 guardsmen there. You know, but Article 4, Section 3 of our Constitution, the federal government shall protect each state against invasion and against domestic violence. Our politicians excited the people all summer long with all these riots and protests. It's ridiculous. Right. They excited domestic insurrections amongst us. Especially when then Senator Harris at the time said it won't stop the riots and it shouldn't stop. Maybe she should have been impeached for inciting domestic violence. They want to hold Trump accountable? Well, you know what? It works on both sides of the aisle. It's time we hold everyone accountable before we lose our country. I mean, we had Antifa, Black Lives Matter, Proud Boys, left-wing groups, right-wing groups. They were all protesting. They were all rioting. The assaults on our people and our police is an assault on our society, and it was ridiculous. Our leaders needed to stand up, put an end to this violence, and they refused it. Republicans and Democrats, folks. Mm-hmm. They play into our emotions, and they do it well. Peacefully protest, all for it. It's in our Constitution. But when a political party uses it to advance a political position, that's overstepping the law, and it should be condemned.
You know, it goes back again. A true democracy rules on emotion.
You know, Jack, I know we're fed up. I mean, we think the people are too. I mean, people don't know about our history, or maybe don't want to know. They want to change it for some reason or another. I don't know why they're trying to erase it. By erasing Dr. Seuss, what did Dr. Seuss ever do? What did Pepe Le Pew ever do? You know?
Yeah, Winnie the Pooh might be next. You don't wear pants.
You never know. I mean, but what are we doing here? I mean, someone must let people know that we can bring change that we need. And it has to start somewhere. And I think we can do it, one person at a time. I mean, before we know it, I mean, we'll have thousands of people following us.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, you got it. You know, we were founded on a republic and not a democracy. And that's what we're going to talk about next. I will reform that on democracy. Reform that on republic and not democracy.
Yeah, in the Constitution, Article 4, Section 4, it states that the United States should guarantee to every state in the Union or Republic form of government. That's the government that they had taken over. Now, think about when they were making this government up. They had done the Declaration, which stated what type of government they want to live under. Then they started the Constitution, the Congress, the first Congress, and fighting a war, going overseas to be diplomats, and studying governments to figure out what we're going to be. And they came up with a republic.
Yeah, in the Federalist Papers, they talk a lot about other countries and monarchies and rulers and why they were Republican. And it's like an eye-opening experience to read about everything that they were talking about.
And while they were talking about it and debating it, they were fighting a revolutionary war against the most powerful country in the world.
And we won.
Hell yeah.
In a republic and a democracy, both elect people to represent them and protect their interests. I mean, republics and democracies both provide a political system in which citizens are represented by elected officials who are sworn to protect their interests. In a pure democracy, laws are made directly by the voting majority, leaving the rights of the minority largely unprotected. In a republic, laws are made by representatives chosen by the people and must comply with a constitution, that specifically protects the rights of the minority from the will of the majority. I feel democracy is mob rule. This is what the riots wanted all last summer. 51% of the people can take the rights of all others. It's not fair, folks. This is what our elected leaders want. It's what other people, segments of our society want. They don't want a republic. They don't want laws. They want to make their own. A democracy does not last. It leads to socialism. Look at North Korea and Venezuela. I mean, how do you think their citizens are making out? It's not what we want. I know I sure don't.
Well, it goes back to the question again. We understand that people have opinions and differences, but explain it. I have not ever heard one person explain what they want in place of a republic. What type of government do you want if you don't want a republic that we are run under?
The funny part, I'll get back to the riots, and they built their little jazz city. They stated they didn't want guns. They don't want guns or police. But their leaders were walking around carrying guns, enforcing their own laws. So do you want police? You don't want police? You want guns? You don't want guns? But it's okay if they have guns and they're making the enforcement rules. But when the Constitution says it, they all get hurt.
Well, I got two side notes on that, because they also don't believe in ID at voting. But in order to get into those chop zones, you needed an ID to get in, or you weren't allowed in. And number two, what organization started chopping up their cities and not letting certain people in, and only certain people were allowed in, and everybody else had to stay out?
Who's that?
The Taliban.
Right.
That's how they started. They started by chopping up the cities until they took over the whole city. Just a little side note for everybody. So, James Madison wrote in Federalist Papers number 14. You can download the Federalist Papers. It's on our website. And he states, the true distinction between these forms, republic and democracy, was also adverted to on a former occasion. It is that in a democracy, the people meet and exercise the government in person. In a republic, they assemble and administer by their representatives and agents. A democracy, consequently, will be confined to a small spot. A republic may be extended over a large region. So in other words, what he's saying is, in a true democracy, what happens is everybody turns into a representative. So everybody gets their vote. In a republic, we elect our representatives, and they are to carry out our wishes in government, which they're not really doing a very good job of that today. In a pure democracy, laws are made directly by voting majority, leaving the rights of the minority largely unprotected. Pure democracies leave the majority with almost limitless powers over the minority. In a republic, the laws are made by representatives, not mobs. These representatives are chosen by the people, and the laws must be complied with, like a constitution that specifically protects the rights of the minorities from the will of the majority. In every republic, an official set of fundamental laws like the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and the government from limiting or taking away certain inalienable rights of the people, even that of a government that was freely chosen by a majority of the people. This is what James Madison wrote over 200 years ago. That's why the United States of America is a republic, because this government is always supposed to think about everyone under their rule of the laws, especially a minority party.
If we don't keep it as a republic form of government, we're going to be a socialist society before we know it. And I didn't want to bring up socialism, but I think it's important that we talk about it a little bit. I mean, we've had several members in Congress, Bernie Sanders, the Squad, are very progressive and want the government to control every aspect of our lives. Saul Alinsky, I don't know if you heard about him, but he was a radical leftist. He stated that there are 8 levels of control to reach a social society. If the government controls these 8 things, then we have become a socialist society. Listen carefully and tell me if any of these have been achieved or getting closer to being achieved. Number 1, healthcare, Obamacare. Poverty. This pandemic, COVID-19, is keeping people in poverty, while the elite are making more and more money. There's no middle class anymore. It's just the rich and the poor. $30 trillion in debt. Debt being number 3. Who's paying for this? We are. Taxes being raised. Passing it down to our kids and our grandkids. Number 4, gun control. We all know they're coming for our guns. It's not just the Democratic leaders, but also Republican ones. They want to get our guns. Why? What are they trying to accomplish? Welfare. With people struggling with this COVID-19, the government wants to give you more food, housing, and pay you stimulus money. More is coming, I think. Wait and see. I hope I'm wrong. Number 6, education.
Jesus.
They want to control what our kids are taught and what they can read.
They can never get to school.
It's happening, folks. Dr. Seuss. Whatever else. There's a couple other ones they're trying to take that they say we can't read.
They're just taking the whole school away.
You know, Amazon won't even sell certain books anymore because they don't think it's good for us. Religion. Remove it from government and schools. They've already removed it from government. They've already removed it from schools. That's already done. Look what they did all summer. They let people riot and said nothing, but you couldn't go to mass. You couldn't go to religion. Wake up, people. Yeah. They're coming for you.
Number 7 was that.
Yep, and class welfare. We already talked about it. Divide the rich and poor into 2 groups so it's easier to tax the rich and give more money to the poor. That's all they need, people. It's happening right in front of our eyes. And we can't sit back and let it happen. We have to do something about it.
Number 3, debt. The reason why they run the debt up is because if you think about it, to run a republic, a government that's a republic, is very expensive. To run a socialist dictatorship is very cheap because the money only goes to one set of people.
The rich.
Right. The political class.
Yep.
So if there's $30 trillion in a country like the United States, they don't care because they're getting our tax dollars and we don't have any more money left.
These people make $179,000. Our congressional leaders make $179,000 base salary. They get per diem. If they get on a committee, they get extra money. These people are making more money. You have to ask yourself, why? How do they get to be millionaires? These people, they're making tons of money, Jack, and everybody else is struggling to survive.
Yeah, on the subject of socialism, I know what Dennis had just stated, and those are the dangers of a socialist country, which seems to be where this country is going. for a reason I don't know or understand. But for next week's podcast, what I'm going to do, because we're not going to talk too much on socialism, we're going to leave it for next week. But my research is going to go looking into George Soros. And the only reason why I'm going to look into this billionaire is because the press, now, this press, the mainstream media, says he is unfairly pinpointed as a cause for socialist views. And the research I'm going to do is on progressivism in the U.S. I do know for the first donation that George Soros had done in the United States, well, I'm going to double check this, was $23,581,000,000 to various 527 groups, which is a tax exempt created primarily to influence select nominations, elections, appointments, or defeats of candidates to federal, state, and local, all the way down to the local offices. These groups that he belongs to and runs with and has his name attached to, those are the ones that I'm going to be looking into. So after spending a week looking into these groups and clubs and agencies that has his name tied to it, I'll let you know what I find. And again, this is what I'm doing. And do not be afraid to question the powerful. So I'm going to go try and find out if what the mainstream press is saying about George Soros, that, he's just an innocent guy trying to get his, donate to his favorite elected politician, or is he going to be the cause of this socialist shift and why these socialists are being elected and re-elected into our government?
I'm sure he's part of the problem, but when a billionaire gives a political party millions and millions of dollars,
yeah, I'm sorry,
he's not doing it to get something out of it.
That wasn't $23 billion. It was $23,581,000. I'm sorry.
Yeah, when someone's giving millions of dollars to something, they're not doing it for free, folks. They're getting something out of it. They want something in return.
Well, we'll look into it. We'll see. Again, we don't have a big bunch of people to go investigate this stuff, or producer or anything like that. Just stuff we're going to look at, and I think I should be able to get a lot of material on this guy because, the internet and stuff like that are very friendly to that side of government for some reason. I don't understand why. So I'm going to look into George Soros and see what we find, and we'll get back to you next week on him.
You know what I want to get into? Immigration.